Hello, third and fourth grade. Welcome to reading class with me, Mrs. Felsing. We are going to work a little bit more through our May Be novel today. I'm going to help you with some of the things that we're going to do with that. I hope you're enjoying reading the novel so far. I hope if it's making sense to you. In your reading journal so far, you should have 2 entries. You should have the entries for pages 1 through 13 and 14 through 24. Something I want to remind you, when I do the entries on this video, you should be writing these in your reading journal as well. Some of you are just handing in your independent. No, it should be every single section that we're going through. This week, I'm going to help walk you through some of this, and next week, I'm going to have you do a little bit more of this independently. But I figured for the first week of the book, I'll give you some help, okay? So last section that you did was now on pages 14 through 24. And I think as I was reading the book, that is where May gets dropped off at the Oblingers' homestead. And so that is where we're going to pick up today. I'm going to walk you through pages 25 through 40, and then you will be responsible for doing 41 through 55 on your own, okay? So you need to have your book, your reading journal, and something to write with, okay? Because what I'm putting up here needs to be in your reading journal that shows me that you watched the video and that you follow along and you know what to do, and then you can use my example to help you do your example, okay? All right, so let's take a look. We're gonna start on page 25. You want to make sure that you write down the page numbers up at the top of your page so that we know, or I know, what section you're talking about in the book. So now we're going to write a prediction for this section. So her dad or pa just left, and he just said, till Christmas, do your best. And now she's there. So as a prediction, maybe I'll write, maybe, I'll say, and I'll call her May, okay? So we'll say May gets to know the Oblinger family. That's what I'm going to write down. You should write that down too, unless you have another prediction of your own. But I prefer if you write at least one prediction down. All right, let's see our section. I don't wait until Pa's far before I turn toward the door. Watching him would only stretch the distance. Just a push swings the door open. The air inside is heavy with heat, with darkness, with something I can't name. Mrs. Oblinger turns. Her skirts swirl. Her eyes study me like a lesson. She's fancy and tall, but I've caught it right away. She's hardly older than I. This here's where you'll sleep. She holds out her arm, like showing me a spot vast as the prairie. Not a hint of privacy. A dingy corner, muslin pinned across the ceiling, stained brown from rain that seeps through the sod. I stand straight. Thank you, ma'am. Mrs. Oblinger slices the air with one finger. Use this crate for your belongings. She catches my glance at the ceiling, the sagging cloth already filled with bits of soil. I drop my chin, study my shoes. You'll be no wetter than the rest of us, she says. That makes me think about when we saw that video on Saudis. Remember how they said one of the disadvantages if it rains, sometimes you get wet? Because sometimes, and it sounds to me like the roof of this sadi is caving in. And so as she's looking at her little area of where to sleep, she's looking up and seeing that parts of the roof is caving in. But remember, this is a sadi, okay? So this is going to happen. Once you unpack, you can start in on supper. I wait for her to turn away, so I might have one moment to myself. Mrs. Oblinger doesn't budge. From the pillowcase, I pull Ma's calico. My reader tumbles to the floor. Mrs. Oblinger scoops it up, opens the cover slowly, touches the place I've written my name. I rip it from her hands and hold it to my chest. What was that for? She demands. It's mine, I say. Careful, young lady. She flings the words, more girl than woman herself. My apology spills out. I won't let my schoolwork interfere with my chores. Mrs. Oblinger's eyes meet mine. I was under the impression you couldn't read a thing. Once you unpack, start in on supper. I dump my belongings in a pile, yank off Ma's fancy boots. My toe is more comfortable on the hard-packed earth. My reader and slate I wrap in the pillowcase and slide them as far under the bed as I can. I roll out biscuits on the table, then fix the coffee from the garden. Mr. Oblinger brings cabbage. I thought this might round out the meal. He's got the kind of patchy beard that says he's new to prairie living. Though small, the cupboard holds sacks and tins. Mr. Oblinger's been busy providing for his bride. I lay at the table, waiting. The biscuits grow cold. I stand at the door, wave to Mr. Oblinger near the dugout barn. The missus inside, he asks. I shake my head. He wipes his face with a handkerchief. Wonder where she's gone off to. Heading to the creek, he calls for her. The empty prairie says nothing. I pretend to study, cabbage, beans, a row of potatoes. Instead, I serve up salt pork, pour coffee, and wait. At last, the two walk in, daydreaming out back. Mr. Oblinger's smile stretches too wide. Mrs. Oblinger sits, says nothing. Seems a little strange, doesn't it? You see that how May is the one who's like making the dinner, she's doing the chores, and what is Mrs. Oblinger doing during this time? She's going outside and sitting and not doing anything. In bed, I think through precedents and work long division in my head. It is dark and quiet, and the heavy air remains. I wake to the gray of early dawn and stay silent asleep so as not to rouse the Oblingers. But there's no need. I'm not the only one awake. The sound is muffled like a child at her mother's shoulder, just as Hiram can't hold back laughter during family prayers. Mrs. Oblinger's sobs escape the blankets. Surely Mr. Oblinger hears. 3 of us awake, 2 pretending sleep. So she's listening, and what does she hear? She hears Mrs. Oblinger crying, sobbing, and trying to hide it. So obviously Mrs. Oblinger is not happy about something. Mr. Oblinger stirs. I duck farther under my sheet, and once he's gone, slip into my work dress. Relieved to find the water's low, I grab the bucket. Outside, I breathe in sunshine, taking care not to spend more time than necessary, but still walking slowly enough to study sky and sweep of land, postponing the time when I must enter that closed-in space. She sits, her red dress wrinkled, smoothing tangles from her hair. I lower the bucket, straighten allowing my shoulders to relax. What's that for? Her eyes accuse me. We are out of water, I try. Not that, she says. Why did you sigh? I didn't realize. This work too much for you? No, ma'am. Her eyebrows rise. Did you misplace your boots? Mostly I go barefoot except for church or snowy days. Truly, she asks. There's no need to answer. She can see for herself. She returns to brushing. What happened to your hair? I touch my braid, unraveling. My brother cut it on a dare, I say. She turns away while twisting her curls into a bun. I hear her just the same. Stupid girl. Wow. That's not very nice, especially someone who's coming here, it seems to be doing her work for her. So, interesting. I busy myself at the stove, put the coffee on, start in on biscuits, wonder what Hiram's doing this morning. Remember, Hiram is her brother. Anytime Ma fried up bacon and turned away from the stove, Hiram would make a beeline, grab a piece from the pan, drop it with a yelp, suck on his burned fingers. One morning, he pierced a strip with a fork and waved it to cool, flinging globs of slippery grease on Ma's curtains. She swatted him with the broom, shooing him out the door like an unwelcome badger. Now Hiram must wait outside until bacon frying's done. Ma's probably rolling dough, humming. Maybe Hiram's grinding coffee. Now that I'm not there to help. He's already brought the milk pail in. When Pa gets back, he'll share what he heard in town. I glance up at Mrs. Oblinger, silent in her rocker, and turn back to my biscuits, thankful to be occupied. So May is thinking back about what they might be doing at home. Mrs. Oblinger stands when her husband enters. Her hairbrush slips to the ground. He bends to pick it up and hands it to her. Sorry for the dust. Once the puncheon floor's in, he signals toward the door. Chapman's got extra wood at his place. We'll work on it next week. She lifts her face. What light there is brightens her eyes. Thank you, she says. The coffee is bitter, the biscuits are hard, the bath water's cold. Mrs. Oblinger complains, but doesn't help. How did she manage before now? So it seems like Mr. Oblinger is trying to make her happy. And she's complaining, like she's just not liking it there. It's curious. How am I to know what to do when no one is about much of the time? Am I to track down the missus or force Mr. Oblinger to stop his work? Or do I act like I am the one ordering this household? Like a shadow, Mrs. Oblinger floats about, sometimes outside, sometimes in. Is she at the creek fetching water? This is not my home. I am the stranger here. Okay, we're going to stop at this section. So, I think I have May gets to know, I predicted May gets to know the family. Yes, she does. But, I don't know. It seems like a strange family. One of the things I'm wondering here is that, you know how when we talked about in past books that we've read, and remember we talked about how sometimes people would order their bride from one of the last novels that we read. And they would order their bride and they would put in an ad, and remember the bride would come and then people would see, do we like this person or not? And remember that had worked out in the book Sarah Plain and Tall, right? But in this book, I'm wondering if this is another situation where she came to be in the homestead with him and this is not turning out the way she wanted it to. And that's why May is there to help her transition, to get her ready to be in charge of this homestead, this Sadi, be the wife. But she doesn't seem to be liking it much. But maybe she will. We'll find out. So I guess in this section, I would say May starts her job. Mrs. Oblinger is not very nice. I think you would agree with that. I mean, she called her, said that she was not smart. She doesn't seem to be very helpful. So May starts her job. Mrs. Oblinger is not very nice. And Mr. Oblinger is trying to make his wife happy. It seems like he's a nice guy. He's doing the best he can, but she doesn't seem to be liking this. Connect. One of the things I can say about connection is when in the book May was talking about how Hiram loves bacon. My kids love bacon. When my husband makes bacon, everyone's so excited about that. So my connection here is just like Hiram likes bacon, my kids love bacon. Hope I'm spelling that right. My question, will Mrs. Oblinger change? That's what I'm wondering. Is this just because she's just getting used to things? Is she not? Because it doesn't seem like she appreciates May at all. And I'm wondering if that's going to change over time. Will they become friends? Will this get better? I hope so. That'll be nice for May too. Then she won't be so lonely. So that's my question. And for evaluate, I'm thinking one of the things I'm going to evaluate is Mrs. Oblinger's behavior. I think Mrs. Oblinger, even if she doesn't know how to take care of a house, and obviously May does, I think Mrs. Oblinger should at least help May. and not just sit there and be like, well, do this, do that, and then she goes and sits in her chair, or she goes and stands outside and looks around. I mean, what a waste of a day. Do something. Then maybe she wouldn't be so depressed if she didn't just sit around doing nothing all day. That's just my opinion. So my evaluate is, I think Mrs. Oblinger should help May. And my visualize that I'm gonna do, guess what? Guess what this is? It's a piece of bacon. Bacon. Okay, that is mine. All right, so I did 25 through 40. We did it. I hope that you wrote this down in your reading journal. And you are responsible for doing pages 41 through 55. As you read, see, does Mrs. Oblinger change? I hope she does. I hope so, for her sake and for May's. So I'm excited. See what you find out in pages 41 through 55. And I look forward to reading your reading journals and finding out what you read. Thank you.